Pyro Unleashed presents the Finale3D Tip of the Week, sponsored by Finale Fireworks.
All right, episode number 5. I know we spoke on it a little bit last episode, but I think we're going to dive into VDLs and customizing. I think today we're going to cover everything from comets, meteors, mines, cakes, slices. So I guess let's not waste any time and just start jumping right in. So I think, let's build a, I don't know, red comet, red meteor.
Maybe as we go through this, maybe kind of explain a little bit about VDL, where it kind of came from. What is VDL?
Yeah. So that's a great question. You'll hear, for those who aren't in sort of the Finale ecosystem already, you'll hear Finale users say VDL this, VDL that, and it's just like sort of one of these acronyms that doesn't make sense if you're not in the club. And VDL is not actually supposed to be complicated. It's supposed to simplify your life. And the acronym stands for visual descriptive or visual description, depending who you ask. Language, visual descriptive language is what I say. And really what it is a set of terms that correspond to standard pyrotechnic terminology that you can use to create effects in Finale3D. So instead of, in the simple case, like David said, creating a red meteor, instead of having to tweak some sort of rendering engine parameters and adjust things like wind friction and the size of the stars and whatever it might be, Finale allows you to type words, and it actually supports multiple languages. But for most users who are watching these videos, probably English. So typing English words and then having Finale take those words and convert them into the thing you care about, which is the visual simulation. So does that kind of answer the question?
No, absolutely. No, I think definitely. So yeah. So I just want to kind of maybe get into then, I guess, maybe some as we kind of go through this, maybe talk about some tips of writing the VDL as we start to kind of dive into creating some effects.
Yeah. So we'll start out, I'll create a very basic effect, and then Donnie or David interject. It's really tough when you've done this for so long, you kind of take those tips for granted sometimes, and you forget what it's like to just be starting out for the first time. But I am sympathetic to the fact that there's a lot of ambiguity in fireworks terminology. And so you can't always rely on like taking a cake and reading the description that the manufacturer puts on the side that makes it sound amazing and punching those words into Finale, because sometimes the same word is used to mean different things, or there's actually multiple terminologies that describe the same effect, and Finale uses one, whereas a different manufacturer might use another. So I do want to start out by saying that previously we were looking at supplier catalogs. I'm going to head over here to the Help Center on our website. We have a pretty robust collection of documentation articles on visual descriptive language, on VDL, and they get really dense really quickly, but one that's a great place to start out that's not overly intimidating is the glossary. This is relatively new. We've got this published, and it's very up to date. It's essentially a dictionary, right? It lists each valid VDL term. It has a description of the term, and I think maybe even more importantly, for the vast majority of the terms, especially the ones that are what we call tuned, meaning they work well, we have a video, and the video is a video of the simulation of whatever's shown in the example VDL phrase column. So if you were to take this VDL phrase, 40 millimeter Aqua Comet, use that in Finale3D, what you'd get is what's shown in the video. So instead of experimenting, try to figure out what things look like by typing words, you can just come here and see, I wonder what bees is. Well, I can just click on this little video and hit play, and I can see, what bees looks like. So
nice.
Good, bad, or otherwise, that's what 4-inch bees looks like in Finale. Right? So let's jump in, and we'll just employ some of this knowledge to create some effects, right? So generally, we have a show open here. I think just because it's kind of easier, what I'm going to do is switch to a different show. So I'll go to the file menu and do new show. And now I have two shows open here that I can switch between. So if you're creating effects, typically you're going to want to do that in sort of what I call a sandbox or a separate place, and then that sort of builds up your inventory that you then use to actually script your actual show. You can work in your show, but if your show is already part scripted, you don't want to accidentally screw up some part of your show you really care about while you're trying to bang out some effects or some VDLs, as Finale users will say, right? So pretty much all effects start by, obviously you can pull effects from other places and use them as inspiration, but if you're starting from scratch, you're coming to the effects window and you're choosing create effect. Pretty much every pyro effect starts this way. So you come here, and I'll just erase what's in there. It's just showing me what the last effect I created. So if you come in here the first time, it's going to be blank. This might look a little intimidating the first time you see it, but there's not really that much here. It's just different ways to kind of get the same thing. So let's take that example of the red meteor where David started out. David, what caliber do you want?
Oh, let's say 30.
30. Is that inches or
millimeter?
Yeah. Okay. So that's important, right? Like,
again, like you said, I'm so used to using it.
Yeah. So if you put in 30 and you don't put any units, Finale doesn't know. Doesn't know what you mean. So it's important if you mean inches or if you mean millimeters, it'll accept either. Yeah. And so then we can do red and comet. And I know another one of the things that I just know about VDL is I don't have to type the word meteor. If I don't type any word for the tail color, then I get a red meteor. And for those who are new to Pyro, red meteor means a red point of light with no trail of sparks behind it as it rises from the ground, a single point of light. So most basic thing, just to start out simply, we'll go with this. When you create an effect in Finale, each time you open this dialog box, Finale combs through your My Effects collection and it looks for products you've already made. It looks at what the next available part number is. So if you just launched Finale for the first time and you create a part number, you're going to get part number 10,000. But because I already have effects in my personal effects collection, which is called My Effects, Finale is automatically giving me the next available part number. This is important because you can't have two items with the same part number. You can try, but it won't work effectively. So it's really important that each of your items has a unique part number. If you're creating an effect for a real life item like a cake, consumer cake or a Pro and 4 cake, I recommend using the manufacturer or your supplier's part. Just peace of mind. You want to choose where you're saving this. In this case, I want to save it for use in future shows. So I'm going to put it in my personal My Effects collection. And here is where you get to specify what this thing is called. Yeah. If you don't specify a name, then the description that you put in up here becomes the name. Mm. But if you wanted this to be something else, like 30 millimeter red meteor comet, then you can have the name be different. The name could be banana, it could be apple, it could be whatever. The name doesn't affect the simulation. What affects the simulation is the visual descriptive terms that you type up here. Yeah. All these boxes here are optional. They are all things that you can type into this box. So you can type size, prefire, duration, height, all in here. But some users find it easier and helps them keep organized to have these separated into different fields. So if let's say you were curious, how high is this comet going to go? The results that you're going to get when you click enter are shown as outputs down here. So outputs are things you don't edit. It's just sort of like spell check or, here's a preview of what you're going to end up with. But this moment, it says 65 meters. So if I wanted the height to be different, I can enter a height value. I can enter it at the beginning or the end of the description, doesn't matter. If I say something like 300 meters, it's going to give me 300 meters. If I say 300 feet, then it's going to convert that to meters. So under the hood, it's always meters, but you can get numbers in feet by typing, that here. So if you duration, we'll do an example of duration. If I know this comet burns a bit faster, I can add a duration here. So let's say the comet 2.88 seconds by default. Finale is determining the default height, the default, the brightness of the comet, and its duration, all based on the fact that we typed 33 millimeter. But if because you have a YouTube video of your of a product demo video that it burns quicker, you can type that. So 2s, that makes the duration 2 seconds.
Yeah.
By the same philosophy, you can use this duration field here, and you just type 2. And since it's in the duration box, you don't have to type the S in Finale knows. And that's why it's going to be easier. You don't, can be easier because if you don't know all the special acronyms to get the result you want, then you can get, you can get a better result just by typing in the appropriate box. So we'll go with this. We'll start out as the simple case, and we'll just click enter. And Finale takes me to my effects collection, and that item is going to be highlighted automatically. So now I can select a firing position, click on the thumbnail icon, and there's my comet. It's got a little bit of an angle that's different than the trajectory straight up, because comets automatically, actually all Pyro effects, by default, they have some natural trajectory drift, just like in real life.
Yeah.
So now if I wanted to, say, create a slice out of a series of these effects, how do I go about doing that now?
Yeah, so you can get fancy very quickly. I think the most basic way to do that is to add a bunch of these onto the timeline. So I could just keep clicking, and I can get say if I wanted 13 of them, there we go. That's a way to do it. That's kind of the slow way, but if you already know how to add one effect, you can add many that way.
Yeah.
What I want to do is actually use a fancy scripting function, just as a tip for everyone. Once I've got one in, I can select this guy, and then I can go to script, duplicate, and say duplicate into flights.
Oh.
And as a power user, all you need to remember is Shift F, keyboard shortcut Shift F. I use that all the time. There's the letter F is totally worn off on my keyboard. F for fan, or Shift F for duplicating the flight. So now I can just say 13, and I need to specify the angle between. And so let's say something like 8, for example, and bam. So there's my fan. So we got from negative 48 degrees to 48, which is about 100, just 96 degrees. Maybe that's a little bit too much. So I'll go back and say script angles make into fan, and then I'll just dial this down to 90, and it scrunches in a little bit. So Donnie, if your slice is an altogether fire where all the shots fire at the same time, then at this point you're pretty much done, except for you need to tell Finale, I want these single shots to be a cake, not individual shots on the
Yeah.
So you create the cake shot, you put the cake shots on the timeline, you select them, and then you go to Effects, Combine as Cake Effect. And the power here is that you don't have to know how to write the VDL for the cake. All you have to know is how to script on the timeline and create single shots. So that red comet became this full VDL here. 13 shot, 90 degrees, 91.4 HTM is height in meters, 2 second duration, red comet, 1 row, and then the A, the little letter A stands for the fact that this is the A effect. There's only one, so it's just the same effect being shot 13 times.
Yeah.
And it's FNT stands for fan together. So there's a lot going on there. And I would tell you, like, generally I wouldn't even bother typing it, because it's so quick to script it and let Finale do it for you. So now you could just see, I've got, last time we created an item, we had part number 10085. Now we have 10086. So I can call this my 13 shot red meteor slice, and I'll just put that in my effects, and bam, there it is. So now I can leave these, or I can blow them away with my delete key, drop in the cake, and now I just have that one duration bar because that item's a cake. How simple as that.
Very good. All right. And say I want to create, I guess, kind of start to get a little bit more in depth with like comets. I know the growing common thing lately has been like a red strobing or a green strobing comet. How would you go about writing that VDL?
Yes, it's a good question. So let's go ahead and we want to stick with 30 millimeters.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, so 30 millimeters. And so let's erase this. So I kind of jumped over something there. I get in the habit of using the keyboard shortcut. So when you see something magically appearing on my screen, it's probably because I mashed some keystroke on my keyboard. In this case, create effect is Control G.
Yeah.
So if I just hit Control G, that pops up, and then I can start typing. So 30 millimeter red strobing comet. Let's see what I get when I do this.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to drop this. I'm going to remove this cake, and then just drop this in the show. Let's take a look. Okay, so David, I don't think that's what you meant.
No.
Okay, so what you actually want is a comet that has a tail that gives off little red strobing microstars, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So this is a good example of how now this gives us an opportunity to show you how you can edit an existing effect. So you don't, instead of deleting it and starting over, you can just go to your My Effects collection, right click, and choose Edit this item.
Yep.
And this option is used for racks and for pyrotechnic effects. You can just ignore the word rack because we're editing the VDL for pyro item. So it basically brings us back into the same window. The difference is really that the part number is locked down. You can't change the part number when you're editing an existing effect like you can when you're creating a new one.
Yeah.
So this is where it's really useful to know, it's essential to know some terms from the VDL glossary. And specifically, in this case, we need a phrase. So we need to know 3 words together to create what we want, and that's red strobing willow. And if you don't specify, if you don't specify that it's a comet, you'll get a shell by default. So you want to specify, the red strobing willow could be a shell that's a willow shell, but if you say red strobing willow comet, then you automatically get the effect that you expect. And so we can just go ahead and click enter to save. And because I have this item in the show, it's offering to update the item in the show because My Effects is not the show. My Effects is your inventory of items you might put in the show, but because it recognizes that this part number is already in the show, if I click yes, then it updates the comet that's in the show. Now we have a look like this. And this is pretty proud of this because if you go back, it's starting to have been a while, but in the not too distant past, you couldn't create something like this using VDL. So the VDL language is evolving. If you go back, a year plus, you would have to use some customizations to get this kind of look. So it's really cool to be able to get something like this just by typing those 3 words, red strobing willow. Using Donnie's example again of creating a cake, we can do something like Shift F to duplicate into flights. And then this time, let's make it a cake that sweeps from one side to the other. So I'll just go ahead and hold my mouse here on the right-hand side of this last effect. And I get this vertical line when I put my mouse over this little end cap. Then I can just drag to the right. And I can just watch it and see if I like that timing. If I'm happy with that, I can select that. Control P to combine it into a cake. Enter, give it a name, and then I've got my cake. So, you can creating slice cakes once you get the hang of the scripting. For those who are new, it'd be like, what the F just happened? But once you get the hang of a few shortcuts and you get used to those, making effects and combining cakes and things becomes much, much easier. Yeah.
Perfect.
Now, what if I wanted to take now, say that red strobing comet, and say I wanted to, instead of being a comet, I want that to be a tail for a shell that's going to break.
Tail for a shell that's going to break. Okay, yeah. So I think what you want to, shall we modify this effect, or are you thinking to go ahead and create,
We could create another effect, something similar to that,
So, so how big a shell are you thinking? Like a cake insert kind of shell? Or
like a cake. I mean, we're going to make like a
maybe
something 10, like a 9 or 10 shot cake or something like that. Yeah, that's some 2-inch shells or something.
Yeah, so what's a color combination I really like? So let's do some white strobing peony. That'll be our break, our shell.
Yeah.
And it's not necessary, but I always, when I create shells, I tend to think of the way that descriptions are typically written on shells, which is the main effect description and then with the tail, as opposed to writing it from the ground up. You can do it either way, and Finale's fairly forgiving. Like you could write, red strobing willow tail to white strobing peony. But this is, I think, the way I would recommend it is to think of it as the main effect being the burst, and then the tail, which is that star that's glued on the shell that burns as the shell rises. Let's see if this works. Let's make it a little more interesting. Let's give it a blue with blue pistol. So this will be should be a white strobing sphere of stars with some blue at the middle, and then a red strobing willow rising tail. And when you start doing this, and even I don't know exactly what we're going to get here, you will find that like VDL doesn't always give you exactly what you want. It often will give you something that's not quite right. And then
this is the way I would write it, but
Yeah.
yeah. So there we go. And so yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
So there's our 1.2 inch. So there's our red strobing willow tail, and our white. That's pretty sparse on the white strobe, and then the blue. And it's a small effect. This is something the size of for those who are old enough to remember canisters of film. This is an effect that's no bigger than the size of a film canister, right? So it's not super big, but this is a good moment, Donnie, to talk a little bit about effect adjustment terms.
Yeah.
So with VDL, you get the ability, if we go in and edit, to not, you don't have to, let's say I looked at this and I go, whoa, my white strobe peonies are way better. They have a lot more stars. We have an article called VDL adjustment terms that describes all the terms you can use, but they're things like big, small, dense, sparse, thick, thin. And so if you want the stars to be denser in this effect, you can do dense, and that will, you can also do very dense. So for example, we can exaggerate it by doing very dense.
Now, if I put like, say, ridiculous, can you put very, very, very dense?
That's a great question. So that's another thing that would fall under best practices like this. I just paste this word very here multiple times. That actually doesn't work.
Okay.
So the phrase that the VDL parser is looking for is that phrase very dense. So if we want this is not how you'd speak in English, but if you wanted very, very dense, you'd actually have to type very dense, very dense, very dense.
Okay.
Because the token that you want applied is these two words together. So
gotcha.
I'm using my arrow keys and copy paste here to do that. So here's an example. I did very dense 3 times, and that's compounding the density of the stars. And now we're getting that. So, not maybe quite the most realistic. So we can go back to edit this, and we'll just remove very dense a couple times. And then, another thing I see is that the duration on these stars is really short, less than a second.
Yeah.
So I could go ahead maybe and say, no, my white strobe has a great duration. We'll say maybe 1.5 seconds. And then we'll go ahead and give that, take a look at that. Maybe something more like that.
Yeah, very good. So
Donnie, for your cake, we've got one shot now. Are you thinking straight up? Are you thinking fan cake? Are you thinking maybe a Z cake?
I would say something maybe just a straight up cake with like 20 shots or something like that. Yeah.
Straight up cake, 20 shots. Okay, so here's
like a 5x4 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's a great example of I can show you a feature that is for inserting multiple effects. We've got one. We need 19 more to make 20 shots. So I'll just select this item and go to Script, Insert Multiple Effects, and I'm going to insert quantity of 19 of the selected effect. You could insert 50 different effects doing this if you're building like a bucket toss aerial show or something. But in the simple case, you can insert, just a quantity of a given effect. I'm going to put them all at the same time for now. And then there they are. So now we can see there are 20. I know there are 20 because this is the only thing in the show, and I can see the count. And if I select them, it shows me, 20. So Donnie, what are you thinking for the duration of the cake?
Let's do like 20 seconds.
Okay, so we'll go to Script, Sequences, Spread Out Evenly, and that'll spread these shots out evenly over 20 seconds. So this is going to be from the first burst. The way this tool works is the first burst to the last burst.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so something like that. And then how about we say it has a
4-shot finale.
4-shot finale. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and select those last 4 shots, and I can just, I could use spread out evenly, or I can just kind of scrunch them in.
Okay.
And now I've got, a cadence with evenly spaced shots and for a faster paced finale. A lot of times those are really almost instant fusion.
Yeah.
So you just put them together. Now, I know for those who have a lot of experience with cakes, you might be thinking, well, but Drew, when I watched a demo video of this cake, the shots aren't perfectly timed, right? There's sometimes the delays between shots are a little more and a little less. Finale handles that. Like, so yes, they're spread out evenly now as single shots in the timeline, but I recommend you leave them that way.
Yeah.
Unless the cake truly has different cadence.
Yeah.
So here we know, like, really, truly the cake shoots faster at the end, then we should represent that. But for the rest of it, so I would call this the first segment of the cake.
Yeah.
I would bet if we tore the cake apart, they use the same type of fuse for the first 16 shots.
Yep.
So from that perspective, we spread them out evenly and put those last 4 close together. And then again, we'll go to effects, combine as cake effect. And here's our final VDL. I won't go through the technical details of it, but we'll just put it in.
So based off of that, it already assumes that we have 5 rows in this cake.
Yeah, it does. And, to be honest, like, it's not always going to get the right answer, but the simulation is going to look fine. And so if it decided it was 4 rows of 5 versus 5 rows of 4, I would just, I wouldn't, there's no reason to override it because that level of specificity isn't going to matter down the road.
Yeah.
In terms of other things that Finale does today. So we can go ahead and add that to our My Effects. And then I'll leave that there. This will be interesting. Let's select these items and then let's move these over to this position here just by dragging them. And then on position 7, I'll put the cake at the same time. And then you can see the single shots in the cake side by side.
Lemon cake.
And you can see that it might be hard to coming through the screen share, but the shots aren't all bursting at the same time on the left and right because
a little bit of variability,
randomness that's been added in on the right here. So yeah,
I think that's a good spot. I think to wrap up this episode.
I think so. Yeah, we'll kind of get into breaking apart, describing lines in the effect editor, kind of diving into the effect editor and.
Sounds boring. But you can make cool stuff, right?
You can make some amazing stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Definitely looking forward to going into the effects editor and seeing maybe how you can kind of tweak some things and
sure, I'll learn something.
When to use it and when you don't need to use it, right? Because I think it can definitely get you really deep into the weeds and really make it more confusing if you don't need to be there.
Yeah, way too deep. But all right. Well, thank you again for coming on again, Drew, and knocking out a couple more episodes. I know we're gonna be diving into some more in-depth stuff here really soon, about probably 2 weeks out. But while you wait, be sure to listen to the rest of our normally scheduled weekly episodes on Wednesdays. Check out our website, get some merch. Join our Discord, and with that, I'll leave the rest to you, Donnie.
Yep, and with that, guys, we'll catch you all next week on another episode of Pyro Unleashed. And in the meantime, go out there and unleash your inner pyro with us.
This has been another episode of Pyro Unleashed. Come back each week for more industry insights, technical tips, and awesome pyro designs. Have fun out there, be safe, and as always, remember to unleash your inner pyro with us.